Hi everybody, today I'm going to be reviewing this functional fan lacing corset made by Corset Deal. So here's the front, the side, the back, and the other side. This specific style, finished in the white brocade, was called the Adira corset, but it's no longer available on their website. It could be that the white brocade was not very popular. I decided to buy it in this one because I thought it would come out the best on camera, and you could see all the details of this corset a little bit better than with an all black corset. But currently there's only the black brocade version available on their website, and that's called the Calantha corset. For the length and fit of this corset, the center front here is just short of 12 inches. The princess seam here is 9 inches, and 4.5 of those are from the waist up, while the other 4.5 are from the waist down, so it's pretty evenly distributed above and below the waist. The side seam here, it is 11.5 inches, and in the center back it is 11.75 inches. For the circumferential measurements, today I'm wearing the size 22 corset. So when I measured it right out of the package, the waist did measure 22 inches, so it is true to size. The underbust here is 28 inches, so it has a 6-inch rib spring. You can see that the high hip is shelf-like enough that I was able to detect exactly where the high hip was, where the iliac crest is supposed to rest. So this is 3 inches down from the waistline here. So the high hip is 32 inches, so it has a 10-inch high hip spring, whereas the low hip is about 4.5 inches below the waistline, and this measured 34 inches, so it has a 12-inch low hip spring. Hopefully the silhouette is coming out on camera. The rib cage is relatively conical, whereas the hip, like I said before, is square and shelf-like. So if you have a shorter waist where your hip and your waistline are quite close together and you need something that juts out very suddenly and has a wider hip spring, then this might work for you. In terms of the cut and the silhouette, it does resemble the Restyle wide hip corset a lot. I believe it is about 2 inches smaller in the hips here, both in the high hip and in the low hip. But the rib cage is comparable, and the length of the corset is very comparable to the wide hip corset as well. But as far as I have seen, Corset Deal is the only off-the-rack company that has experimented with functional fan lacing corsets. I have seen other corsets that are decorative and seem to have quasi-fan lacing embellishments, but this is actually the first functional fan lacing corset that I have seen at such a low price range. They do have a different fan lacing corset in a different silhouette. I believe it's their candy silhouette, and if I recall correctly, the rib spring is about 4 inches and the hip spring is about 6 inches in that corset. So it's a lot less curvy. It would fit a different body type. But let's go to the tabletop portion of this review and I can show you the other details of this corset close up. I'd like to do something a little bit different and start with the lacing system and talk about the lacing first, because this was the main reason why I bought this corset to begin with, was to check out the fan lacing and see whether it was indeed functional fan lacing and how user-friendly it is. So the laces themselves are white nylon round cord. They have no stretch to them. They have to be a little bit slippery. They have to have some glide so that they go through the grommets smoothly, and they also go through the sliders here through this lacing system. So instead of pulling each individual X here above and below the waist, you are really just pulling on these straps here. So I'm just loosening the straps here so you can see how it works. Here we go. So it's open a little bit, and so you wrap the corset around yourself, you do up the busk, position it on your waist as you're comfortable, and then to actually tighten the corset, you grab each one of these straps and you gradually pull, pull, pull. As you pull, these will slide, and the little teeth here will keep the strap from backsliding, so it retains its tightness that way. And so you're pulling on each one of these at the same time in hopes that you get a nice even gap in the back. Now, when I got this corset in the mail, it actually is a little bit looser with the laces at the top compared to the bottom. And in order to kind of fix that, I would have to kind of individually thread all of these and kind of very slowly reposition the laces if I wanted to get rid of that gap at the top that's really slightly wider than this part at the bottom here. But it doesn't annoy me quite that much. The part that I found probably the most frustrating was the fact that if you loosen these straps pretty much as far as they'll go, just leaving maybe that much, just enough to hold on to, just like that, so that you just barely have enough to grab onto and tighten the straps after you wrap this corset around yourself. This is the maximum gap you can get in the corset when you're wrapping it around yourself, so to put it on and take it off. So that is about just under 6 inches at the waistline here. So this corset is not designed for tight lacing, and actually it was kind of put in the small print on the website, but when you go to the listing for any of the fan lacing corsets, it says that it's good for 3 to 4 inches of waist reduction. So it's probably not designed for tight lacing in the first place or waist training. It's meant for mild to moderate waist reductions. So in retrospect, if I had read the listing a little bit more carefully, then I would have gone a size up. I would have bought a 24 instead of a 22 because it was tricky for me to put on and take off this corset. So when you're tightening this corset, pulling on the straps is straightforward enough. It's a lot easier when it's on yourself, when it's on your body. And it's held in place by these teeth at the slider here. So you need to actually, if it's easier to see on this side, here you can pull that back and it will release that bite, so to speak, of the teeth on the strap here, so that you'll be able to loosen it. But when the strap is under tension, like when it's on your body, it is a little bit difficult to slide that catch open and loosen it. So I was actually stuck a little bit the very first time I put this corset on. And my mom and I together had to kind of work individually to very, very slightly loosen the straps here. And then I was like, quote unquote bad, and I undid the busk without fully loosening the laces. So that's another reason why this corset is probably only good for mild to moderate reductions, not tight lacing or waist training, because although it is in some ways easier to tighten the corset by yourself if you have limited mobility or strength in your shoulders and your arms, it is actually more tricky to loosen it and get back out of this corset because it doesn't have any sort of mechanism to just automatically release that tension and let it loosen by itself. So in conclusion, the fan lacing is functional, it is very interesting and nifty, but do not expect this to be the answer to all of your problems. The fashion fabric of mine is a white brocade. It is 70% cotton and 30% polyester, and then the lining is 100% cotton twill here. This is what the label looks like on the inside. So as I said in my earlier corset deal video a few weeks ago, the one from Nepal has not that much information at all on their label, but this one was shipped from India, and you can see it's translated in many, many different languages here. So 70% cotton, 30% polyester, that's for the brocade, and the lining is 100% cotton here. And here is the cleaning instructions and obviously the size. Turning this corset on its side, it has a 6-panel pattern, so 12 panels total. 1, 2, 3 make the front, 4, 5, 6 make the back, and as per usual, panels 3 and 4, which straddle the side seam, they give the most curve over the hip here. As mentioned earlier in this video, not only the silhouette but the shape of each individual panel in this corset is very similar to the Restyle wide hip corset, except it's about 2 inches smaller in both the high hip and the low hip. And opening up the corset, so you can see the construction here, it is also very similar to the wide hip corset in that the two layers of fabric, the brocade and the twill lining, were flat lined and treated as one layer, and then the panels were assembled together with the seam allowances facing inside. And these internal strips of fabric were laid down to cover the seam allowances. They reinforce the strength by straddling the seams, and they provide a place for the boning channel, so it's double boned on the seams here. You can also see that there's a 1-inch wide waist tape exposed on the inside of the corset here. It appears to be a partial waist tape, so it starts between panels 1 and 2 here, and it might stop at the grommets here. It is made from 1-inch wide single-faced satin ribbon, and it's secured down at each boning channel. The binding on this corset is made from bias strips of matching brocade, machine stitched on the outside and the inside. You can see that there is a tiny top stitch on the outside here, bigger top stitch on the inside, and there are 6 garter tabs on this corset, 3 on each side. As well, there is a hanging loop on the top of this corset, but only on the one side. It might have detached from the other side, or they might have forgotten to sew it on. There was a Modesty panel that came with this corset, but it was not sewn onto one side of this corset. It just came separately. So I was not wearing this Modesty panel when I was modeling the corset earlier. But this Modesty panel is a little bit over 7 inches wide, so it probably gives you maybe 5 or 6 inches of usable space, because you can just kind of position it underneath the laces and center it like that. It's unstiffened, finished in matching brocade on the outside and twill on the inside here. Additionally, there is a 1/2-inch wide Modesty placket extending out from the knob side of the busk here, unstiffened and again finished in the white brocade. The busk in this corset is 10.5 inches long, and it has 5 loops and pins, all equidistantly spaced. It is a heavy wide busk, so it's 1 inch on each side, and it's typical stiffness for a heavy-duty busk. There's a total of 24 bones in this corset, 12 on each side, not including the center front busk here. So it's double boned on the seams, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and these are 1/4 inch wide spiral steel bones. You can see how they attract my magnet here. And then sandwiching the grommets in the back here, there are 2 1/4 inch wide flat steel bones, and they also attract my magnet here. And the grommets are a little bit difficult to see because of all the laces crisscrossing over them, but there are a total of 24 of them, 12 on each side, size 0 with a small to medium flange around them, and finished in silver. They're equidistantly spaced, a little bit more than 1 inch apart, and you will notice the difference between the lacing system here versus in the corset that came from Nepal. The bones are a little further away from the grommet itself. The sandwich is not quite so tight, and I've noticed that in this corset the bones do twist a little bit in their channels, and the gap is not, parallel on me. And here's the underside of the grommets, and you can see that there are washers. You'll notice that the way that these grommets were rolled are different from the most other grommets. It's very smooth. It looks like it was hammered to match the contour of the washer itself, as opposed to kind of rolling into like a little divot within the washer. So that's a little bit different to how the corset deal corsets that were made in Nepal are done. Slightly different hardware in the back here. But you can see they seem to be biting into the brocade fairly well, so that they're not like loose. I don't see any sort of damage or pulling away of the brocade from the grommet itself. As mentioned earlier in this video, this corset used to be available in, I believe, 4 different colors. The white brocade that you see here, ivory, red, and black brocade. But perhaps the other colors were not quite as popular and they were discontinued, because when I checked the website recently, the black brocade seems to be the only one available. The RSP for this corset, according to the Corset Deal site, is $100 US, but Corset Deal seems to have a perma sale going on, so the last time I checked their website, this was on sale for $70. This corset is available in closed waist sizes 20 inches up to 38 inches, but as I mentioned previously in this video, do keep in mind the rib spring and the hip spring, as well as the maximum lacing gap that you can achieve when you loosen this corset all the way with the straps, because if I were to go back and order this corset again, I would probably go a size up so that I'd be able to put it on and take it off a little bit more comfortably. This corset review was made possible by my Patreon supporters, so thank you all so much. My supporters on Patreon, whether they donate $1 a month or up to $50 a month, they all get to vote on which corset brands and styles I review on this channel in the future. So if you want to check out how my Patreon works and you want to say in which corsets are reviewed on this channel in the future, feel free to check out my Patreon up in the cards above or linked down in the description below. So this concludes my review of this functional fan lacing corset made by Corset Deal. I hope you enjoyed this review and you learned something new. If you did, please remember to click that like button down there, as it helps support this channel. If you have any comments or questions about this corset or fan lacing corsets in general, feel free to leave a question down below, because I will be making a specific video dedicated to fan lacing corsets in the near future. If you own this corset or a different functional fan lacing corset, even from another brand, feel free to leave your comments down below, because I'm sure many people would be curious to know how fan lacing corsets work for you and your lifestyle. Thank you again so much for watching, and I will see you all next week for another video. Bye!